I think we're live. Is there some lag? A little bit. Hi everyone, my name is Dorian. I'm a painter and a teacher, and this is my good friend Patrick. And behind us is a painting that he's worked on for I think over 12 years. And this session is about painting and his journey on making it. Patrick will talk a bit about technique as well. He's combining different painting approaches technically in one image, in one painting, and a bit about philosophy, what it means to be an artist and a human, a person. And I'm excited for those of you who don't know Patrick yet to meet him and to see some of his work. My function will be more tech guy today. I'll be managing the cameras and reading your questions from the chat to Patrick so you can answer them. But Patrick will do most of the talking. Let's go.
Okay, so I took some notes, so I won't start rambling too much. But I just want to say a few things. First, thank you, Dorian, for giving me this chance to talk about this painting. It means a lot to me. And thank you for being here and being interested. That means a lot to me too. I really appreciate this chance to communicate what I've been doing for the past 12 years on this painting. It means a lot to me, and I want to explain a little bit about it, why it means so much to me. So, another thing I want to say before I start is I wrote this down here. If the creative act is a matter of survival for you, what I'm going to say is especially meant for you. And then furthermore, if you have been or are a victim of abuse, I paint this painting behind me with you in mind. So, as long as I can remember, when I started, as an art student, when I went to the museums, what I liked best was multi-figure paintings, complex compositions. They really spoke to me. It really drew me in, those paintings and sculpture. And I think it is the reason I decided to study art. It was just amazing to me that the thought that I could communicate someday what is most important to me. And that just really it just really took me in, this thought. And during my lengthy education, I kept thinking about that too, that this was my goal. This is what I wanted to do eventually. And, then I quickly realized how difficult this is actually to accomplish. And especially, not only technically difficult, but also financially, time-wise. Okay, let me see. I started with the painting when I was, that was 12, even 13 years ago. I built a frame myself, glued a canvas, controlled the ground with lead white. Just traditionally, the way it used to be done. Gave a lot of thought that this dream of mine would be archival someday, so I gave that a lot of thought. I had been working on it on and off, maybe I need to mention that too. I haven't been working full-time on this for 12, 13 years. It wasn't like that. I was not able to work on this solely. I had to do many other things. But in 2013, someone loaned a book to me, and it was about Katharina Schmidlin, who lived in 1652. So Katharina Schmidlin was an 11-year-old girl, lived in 1652 in Entlebuch. Some of my ancestors come from Entlebuch. And so I could even be somehow related to her, And a person wrote a novel about her after she found facsimiles in the archive of the city of Lucerne. So in those archives, what they showed was when they tortured Katharina for witchcraft, the scribe would painfully, he would accurately, well, I suppose it was accurate. He would write everything down, what they asked her, and then what she answered. So they would ask her a question, and then she would answer, and if they didn't like the answer, they would torture her until the answer was acceptable. And this was all written down. So this little girl was 11 years old. And it's just heart-wrenching when you read this. Might have not exactly happened the way that Evelyn Hasler is her name, the woman who wrote the story. It happened that way, exactly the way she wrote it. But I kept thinking about my daughter when she was 11 years old. And it was just mind-blowing what that did to me. It's just I could just smell the whole thing, what they did to this little girl. I could see it, I could feel it, and it really put me on the journey of finding out what's most important to me. And it really took me on the journey to find the direction this painting was going in. I have been using the Venetian Method on this painting largely, but not solely. And I have broken a lot of rules. So it wasn't kosher, Venetian Method. I took liberties, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take risks, I'm going to take liberties, and then it will be more authentic. It will be exactly what I want to say. It will be more powerful this way. But it was risky. For a while, this painting looked like quite a mess. And so Katharina's novel caused me to do research on witch burnings. And what I found out, it's relatively easy to find out, but it's just, again, mind-boggling that European history for 300 years, mostly women and children were killed for witchcraft. The estimate is about 60,000 of them. So one of the reasons why this epidemic, I call it an epidemic of, fanaticism, why it spread so vehemently was because of a book called Malleus Maleficarum. That's Latin. And the translation of that is Hammer of the Witches. This book was written by Heinrich Kramer he was a Dominican monk. And I tell you, I read that book. I'm not a psychologist, but I will say as a human being, this guy was insane. He hated women. He was uncomfortable with children. And so he created an encyclopedia how to find witches, torture them, and kill them. And so, you know, what this did with me was something I've always been asking myself. I've always been very fascinated with, is why works the world the way it does? You know, why is there so much suffering in this world, and why is the world so? Are there so many contradictions? Like, you have all this suffering, and you have all this beauty, and you have all this empathy that people are capable of. At the same time, the hatred, the violence, the wars, the persecutions. You know, what is going on? Why is this happening? You know, why are there people like Heinrich Kramer right there? What is the motivation? What is going on? So, after 12, 13 years now, I can say that I was trying to do here is help victims of abuse, persecution, give them a voice, you know, show how terrible it really is what they have to go through. And I tried hard to show how terrible it is. At the same time, I didn't want to point fingers. I was not interested in saying, look how bad some people are and others are not, and what's their problem and all that, because that's not being solution oriented, you know. I also felt that I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not an intellectual. I'm an artist with a philosophical bend. Who, you know, philosophy has always been my hobby. I have tried to live a spiritual life, and sometimes have succeeded, sometimes I have failed. I'm really interested in Jungian psychology because Carl Jung really got into this whole thing that all of us have empathy in us, unless we have, you know, we're like damaged. But we also have a dark side, a shadow. And Carl Jung felt that it's really important to deal with our dark side, with our shadow, in a healthy way. And that fascinates me. And I would love this painting to be like a stimuli for smart people to discuss what's happening in this world right now. Also, not put under the carpet what's been happening in the past in Europe for 300 years. It was totally insane to go after women and children like this because some bloke had a major problem with them, you know? He wasn't the only reason, but I read that there were years back then where there sold more copies of the Malleus Maleficarum book than of the Bible. And it's just think about that, you know, how this book managed to justify murder and torture. I mean, we're not just talking murder, we're talking slow, painful torture, and sometimes these people were burned alive in front of everyone, you know? So similar things happen now. And horrible things also happen in the dark where no one sees it. Happen to children, happen to women, who, you know, and to men, of course. It can happen to all of us. Before I start, you know, getting totally carried away, because I could talk about this about 5 hours and we don't have time. But I just want to say this. For all my life, I've had people come to me who have been abused and tell me about it. And some of the things that I've been told what happens to people, they have made me so incredibly sad that it was hardly bearable. Because I've never been trained, you know, to, like a psychologist is trained to be supportive of people who have gone through such awful things. I was often, it was too much for me. And I think I want to learn much, much more about this, what it means to show empathy, to help when something like this happens, rather than making it worse. I think the way to do that is self-reflection, honest self-reflection. And honest self-reflection implies that we also take a look at our own shadows, you know, that we don't resort to pointing fingers, because I think this is what's happening way too much right now, again, in this world. Like, it's always happened. But now it's crazy how everyone's pointing fingers, right? I mean, we all know that. That's kind of really a crazy thing that's going on. But what if people just take the courage and reflect, self-reflect, just take a look. And the beautiful thing about that is, I think, when we take the courage to do that, we discover not only our shadows and see what that looks like, because shadow has reflected lights. There is light in there, and shadow is not bad. Shadow can turn bad and go wildly against you and make you go crazy, like it obviously did with the author of this Malleus Maleficarum. But it doesn't have to. Shadow is needed. You know, we as artists, everyone who paints and sculpts knows that we need shadows. We need, wherever there's light, there's shadows, and the shadows are not bad. They're necessary, because you cannot have form without it. Well, that's not entirely true. You can still see form if there's no shadow, but it's kind of hard. But that whole play that nature gives us between form and atmosphere is an incredible thing, because there are shadows, because the shadows remind us that we live in space, that there's atmosphere around. That's what's happening with the shadows. It reminds us of a truth about our existence that is really significant. And yes, so I think I've talked enough, right, about why I wanted to do this, and now I'm getting closer to getting finished. I hope I can spend a lot of time and finish it for the next few months. And I want to show you some things and talk about this method, this Venetian method, which I love. I've come to love the Venetian method because it's really conducive to the creative process. I was taught the French academic method and the Flemish method, and the Venetian Method. And over the years, I have come to rely mostly on the Venetian Method for that reason, because you can be the most creative, you can move things around, you can play with the drawing. If you don't like something that you before settled on in your drawing, you can actually change it in your underpainting. And so, yes, this painting has an underpainting. And over here, you can see, like, yeah, here you can see the first layer of underpainting. I paint in a way that I'm a surface nut. I love the smooth surface, the eggshell surface. So I'm really careful how I apply the paint. Here you see all this is all the first stage. Sometimes I keep the shadows completely translucent. When this is a neat thing you can do with the Venetian painting, you can actually keep some parts translucent totally. I use the brown. When it goes really far deep in there, I keep it all brown and give some opacity to the shadows right away, where it doesn't go far in. But I keep that very thin. I sand it down and make sure there's no texture. I love that when the shadows have no texture, but then build up the lights, you build up the lights almost like a relief. Yeah. Then here you can see I do usually 2 layers. The underpainting here, you can see this is the second layer for the underpainting. And here I have already the shadows are always ahead of the light in finish. And here, because there's so much reflected light from this fire, this shadow will be finished, just has one more go and it'll be finished. So, and then over here, over here you can see this is the first layer of color. And over here you can see that this wasn't, do you see this greenish, brownish color? This is actually what you do in the Venetian Method. You paint your underpainting high key, which means it's lighter than it's going to end up being in the finished product. So you have this high key underpainting, and then you actually put this brown greenish sauce. It actually turns greenish, that brown turns greenish on you because of the grisaille. And you put that over it, and then it's too dark.
So this is first, and then this goes...
No, this is a little confusing because this will stay like stone. Mm. So this is actually painted over this again, Okay. But what's so fantastic about the Venetian Method is what you can do with color. Maybe some of you have heard of Optical Grays before. That's exactly what happens with this method, especially if you use lead. You have to use lead white. You don't have to, but you don't even need much painting medium if you use lead white for the optical grays to happen. If you use an opaque white, you have to use you have to thin it down so the optical grays will actually happen. So you can see that a lot of these cools in here, this is the first layer, it's not finished. You can see that a lot of these cools in here, I didn't mix them. They actually happened on the canvas as I was applying the paint, So the idea is that what should happen, maybe you can print it right there. Do you see how everything is warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool? And that's exactly what actually happens in our skin. And this is really hard to get. Alla prima painting is actually impossible to get it like this. Unless, this, you can... I personally think that even Sargent did some in some of his paintings, or Zorn, they did underpaintings and darkened it, and then they would paint alla prima over it, and then they would get the optical grays. So it just looks so real, and it's a way to actually have an impressionist coloration in an academic painting. That's all complicated. I could talk about hours about that too. What the difference is between impressionism, academic impressionism, and academic painting. But there are major differences. Here you can see this is finished, and yeah, it shows it a little too warm, but I can't change that as the camera. Yeah, but you just clean it up. You clean it up because in this method it looks kind of gritty. Like it looks kind of when you look in your computer, you enlarge.
Pixelated.
It looks pixelated, yeah. And then you can go on top, and you can calm it down. Basically, you make the pixels smaller, as you finish it. And I really love it because this kind of, you basically can have impressionist color, but you can still paint like an academician would, high finish, and the form is really super important still. But most of the time you kind of have to make up your mind, will I be more truthful to nature with color, or will I be more truthful to nature with form? And then you have to compromise there. And I find that this method kind of combines the two beautifully. Not perfectly, it's impossible to do it perfectly. Yeah. So much for the technique. Maybe you have questions about it.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm gonna take a look. No questions yet. I see the camera is quite shaky. I apologize.
Do you have questions, Dorian? Oh, there's something happening.
Adam says, Patrick, you said you'd love people to discuss this work. Can you describe how that might be?
Yeah, I will take every opportunity I get to show the work, and I will ask to be able to talk about it, I will show it in Liechtenstein. There will be an exhibition about the witch burnings, because Liechtenstein had a lot of witches as well. So, and I'm just gonna try to show the painting as much as possible and talk about it as much as possible. Is that a good answer, Adam?
No, he also said online, in a book, in an exhibition. But I guess you answered that, yes. Could you please tell something about the symbolic meaning or symbolism in the painting?
Okay. Yeah, I like I told you before, this whole thing hit home really personally. So Katarina, because I was a dad of an 11-year-old girl, and I love my kids unbelievably, like a lot of parents do. It's just and when they were little, I shot some really cool photos of them, and I shot some photos of my daughter when she was 9, and I dug up those photos, and they're black and white. You can see here's one. Here is one of them. Oops.
Sorry. Too many cameras.
Yeah. And it was just perfect that I thought, okay, even the lighting just totally fit into the composition I had already started, and it just made sense. So I worked from these black and white photos of my daughter. So she's here, and she's sculpting a bird. And this is actually something that the title of the novel about Katerina is The Bird Maker, because she was actually accused of witchcraft because she told the other children that she was able to make birds out of clay and make them come alive. To get attention, probably. The other children thought that was pretty cool, or were scared, or they told their parents, and then the parents started telling each other, and then the magistrate came into town and got wind of it, and he had a hard time to have these people pay their taxes and all that. So she got wrapped up all in the politics of grown-ups and their big stories all around money and importance and all that. And she became collateral damage. So here is Rebecca posing as Katarina. And here's the bird she's creating with clay. Down here is Rebecca again. I used this image before in another painting, and I flipped it around so it would fit the painting better, and I changed the lighting a little bit. This person here, we all know this guy, or it's male or female. We know that person. It's pain, we all have experienced pain, and we will, till the day we die, experience more of it. That symbolizes pain. We're all familiar with it. So now what will we do with that familiarity? Obviously, I already told you this guy here. Here is Heinrich Kramer, the guy who wrote that book, the Encyclopedia, How to Torture and Kill. And I just exaggerated willingly the madness that entered him and those who would act upon what he was writing about. Actually, this is this guy. So here's the book. And he's like the how do you say it in English? The henchman?
Henker.
Henchman?
It's no. Something Eschener.
Yeah,
he's the
executioner. He's the executioner, and he just acts upon the law. He has a nice excuse. It's all written in a book. He has a job. I found out that this was actually, had to do with a way to make money for a lot of people. This whole witch story, a lot of people made a lot of money with it. So, but he's basically, just what I'm trying to say here. He destroyed himself mostly by just going along with this. Over here, the symbolism is that I thought, because I'm painting about so many awful men. Here is actually a man who has empathy, and so he reacts very differently to what's happening to Katharina. And Katharina, of course, is just a symbol for the many who had to go through this ordeal and lost their life before their time. And yeah, he's a male figure who is a fatherly figure. I guess my fatherly feelings for my daughter, I try to express how much I love her and how it's unbearable, how unbearable the thought is that something like this would happen to her. And I think that many, many fathers feel that way. I hope. I know people who didn't have fathers like that, and it's just one of the saddest things that I can possibly imagine. And my heart goes out to them, like some of my friends. Their stories is just, when you hear it, you just can't. It just becomes really, really difficult to deal with emotionally. This woman is my wife and my lover. I love the way she is, the way she looks, everything about her. She has been very sick since 2.5 years now, and so I was so glad that I decided to paint her in here like this, because initially I chose her because, to me, she is a person who would have been burned at the stake for sure. It's just the way she is. She's self-determined. She makes up her own mind, and she's a very strong person. And here I actually found out that this guy, in his book, he kept writing about the bow witches. Like in 3 different places in his book, he mentions bow witches. And then I figured out this must have something to do with the goddess Diana, the goddess Diana who went to, she was not dependent on a man for her food. She was the goddess for the hunters, for hunting, and she's depicted with a bow. And I think a lot of this Greek stuff made it into 17th century and all that. And then Heinrich Kramer managed to turn that all into witchcraft and show how this was demonic and evil and barbarian, And so that's why she has the bow. But this, this bow is very, very symbolic too. It has to do with her femininity, and she's not apologizing for her female powers. And she's wounded because she really is right now, but I believe she will get over it. 2.5 years being sick for so long is a very long time. And very, there's a lot of pain. But I believe she'll get over it. And this really helped me to paint her strong and healthy. And the wound will heal, and she'll be all the stronger for it that she made it through this difficult time. So I think it's okay for artists to make things personal sometimes. I think it's okay and important for us to have strong emotions. Like I said before, we might be intellectually gifted, but we cannot, as artists, we cannot keep up with the smartest people in the world, the intellectuals. You know, we spend too much time painting and drawing. We cannot keep up. So it's, if we're just authentic and honest, if we just say, we have strong feelings, we have strong opinions, but when we say the truth, you know, it is what it is my opinion, and leave it at that. And then this whole thing takes on a meaning and a legitimacy that is, I think, hard to argue with, as long as we stay honest. Then over here, this guy, we can hardly see him, huh? He has such a glare. Yeah, let's not talk about him.
No, I can come closer with this.
Yeah, he's in the middle of production. It's hard to see what it's gonna look like. Okay, so here is the. You know, I sometimes get so frustrated with the people who have power, because they seem to get so corrupted by it, and probably it could happen to anyone. You know, those who have little power have no idea exactly how this would happen to them, but those who have power, I think they could maybe tell us. You know, that would be nice if they tell us what's happening inside of them as soon as they have power. So, but here, obviously what happened during those 300 years, so many people who had the power to execute those people, their actions actually turned them into what they accused those women and children of. You know, there were some men too, but it was mostly women actually, and then quite a bit of children. So they're actually turning into a demon-like creature the way they have been imagined, you know, or a witch image of evil. It's just all human imagination. What evil looks like, you know, these are just ideas and stories in people's minds, and I wanted to express that how destructive ideas and stories that people believe in, how destructive they can become. Especially when they when the narrative has to do with good and evil, that's when it gets really quite dangerous, that what we others accuse of, we become. So that's what I have noticed. When you read history, that's what happens. So then over here, here's only the first layer that I've painted on that. So here's this idea that Carl Jung is talking about, how that good and evil is in all of us, potentially, you know. And here is the act of compassion again, and this is actually quite an advanced form of compassion, because this person could include the compassion even with the evildoer. So this person is able to see the evildoer as a combination of being a victim, but also being a perpetrator. So basically, what this should say is, we're all victims, we're all perpetrators. So to get around that is not to point fingers, but to accept that, the reality about us, you know. And through that acceptance, that maybe, perhaps, good things come about. I mean, we all know how that thus far, this endless repetition of history, these endless wars that keep coming and going and coming and going. I mean, the reason for this, I think, is found in the human psyche. But again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't understand enough, but I feel enough and I think enough to paint something that could maybe cause the smart people of the world to have a sensible discussion about it. And maybe say helpful things to the rest of us, you know? So that's my motivation to do that. I really feel that am I rambling? Should we look if there's more questions?
Sure, we can look. I have a question. I know part of the answer, but maybe it's not obvious. Like when you make a complex painting like this, one of the standard steps is to make thumbnail sketches, like collect some reference, and then make a composition study, maybe transfer the drawing on the canvas, and then start with the underpainting. Did you do it like this, or what was your process?
No, I broke all the rules. This should I say? Yeah, I broke all the rules on this painting. I did it all wrong. No, it was an experiment. Since I returned to Switzerland, I went to the mountains a lot and collected rocks and schlepped them down here, and I just needed a lot of time to think about things, about what I wanted to do. Had to make sense. Things had to make sense again, and it was really hard. It was a long journey, and just listening to the mountains, what they have to say, it really helped, because they don't say anything, and that's why they say everything, because they actually throw you back at yourself. So you have to, instead of going out to find answers everywhere, which we tend to do as humans because we act like herd animals, I try to go up there, collect my rocks, and go in there and just listen. And so I decided to do things my own way, and I did that with sculpture and with my academic training. I turned my back on my academic training for quite a long time, and this painting, it was crazy how it came about. It was really crazy. It's just, as far as Venetian, the underpainting steps, I kept to them.
Can you maybe, for people who are not familiar, summarize the Venetian Method steps?
Mm-hmm. Venetian Method, you basically, you do drawings, do drawing studies. Then you transfer those drawings onto the canvas. Then you start painting black and white. And you paint the underpainting, the whole thing, black and white first. And you do it high key. That means you actually do it, you keep, your highlights are pure white, and then you go down from there.
Like the figure in the bottom left.
Yes, highlights are pure white. And then you kind of gauge your form from there. It's all too light. That's really important because, first of all, you have to have a really white ground, and then you have to have a light underpainting in this method, because your next step, when the underpainting is all finished, your next step, you put a brown sauce over the whole thing.
And sauce meaning pigment, oil, turpentine?
No, I use transparent brown oxide mixed with terre verte 50-50. Because transparent brown oxide is now a little too warm. But you can do it with it too. It doesn't really matter that much. But a lot of people liked the transparent brown oxide in the past. It was cooler, had more green in it. So you can just put the green in yourself. You go 50-50 and you get a brown, a beautiful brown. Kind of like how transparent brown oxide used to be.
No medium.
No medium, very important. I actually do the entire underpainting with no medium. The fat over lean principle is really, really important here, because your painting needs to stay as dry as possible, you know. It just really needs to stay dry, so you can accept the subsequent layers the way you want.
Dry meaning lean, meaning not oily, but also dry as in oxidized.
Yeah, it's fat over lean just basically just means, fat means you have a lot of medium added to your pigments, and lean means you have little medium added to your pigments. That's why fat over lean. Yeah, it's important if you want your painting to last and if you want certain effects to work for you.
Okay, so you have the sauce on top of the high key grisaille, and then
you let that completely dry, and then once that's dry, you come back and then you do your first layer of paint. You know, like I did here. And the way I apply it is that it gets the warm, cool, absolutely everywhere, you know, and especially in the halftones. You can see that with the Venetians, they left a lot of that just sit there in the halftones. You can also see it in Bouguereau. How you would just let those chunks of paint, let them sit like that rather than calm them down.
The warm, cool you get by how you move the brush.
Yes, you need to experiment with that. That's you know, you have to have, again, you know, I know painters who do it with titanium white or zinc, but they need to use a lot of medium right away
to get the transparency.
To get the transparency and
translucency.
Yeah, because if you know, if you don't have the semi-transparency, which the optical gray lead white gives you, and the other whites will not give it to you unless you add to make them thin them down. So it's sounder if you use lead, because see here I have hardly used any medium. Maybe over here to soften things, I kind of dip the brush in the medium, then dry it off. And then I go in and soften things, and there's a little medium coming in there. But I always stay away from terp in the painting process. I only use terp to clean my brushes, you know, which is also good for your health. Yeah.
So then you have this layer.
Then you have this layer. Now you see, some of this is really crude still, so I need to calm this down. But I try to let it stand crude so I don't lose the dither and the broken color effect of warm, cool. And now with the subsequent layer, I start to use medium. And you know, you can calm this down and get rid of all the optical grays if you want. You can calm it down and make it like some academics paint it, you know, but then the flesh almost becomes too perfect. It loses something that actually happens in reality, you know. And I like to be somewhere in between, depending on who I'm painting, what the meaning is. I mean, you can paint many different kinds of flesh. This is so fun, especially with this method. You have so much more control over that. See here, it's all really full of optical gray play in the halftones, especially in the dark halftones. And then it calms down as you go further out, and it calms down the most where around the highlight. But it is in reality happening absolutely everywhere. That's what's so neat about trying to, actually paint that way, the way it really happens in nature. Which is, again, with alla prima, almost impossible. I mean, you'd have to have these little brushes go tick, 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 like pointillism,
And that is the last stage, the unification, refinement. And you take it as far as you want for a given element in the
Yes.
painting.
I mean, the principles that the old masters talked about, like at least I have learned, you have most unity in the shadows, especially, I'm talking about this lighting condition here, the studio lighting condition. Outside's a different story, perhaps. But most unity in the shadows, which makes perfect sense. And then you have the most variety in the halftones. And then you have more unity again in the lights. And that's sort of an academic recipe which will lead you to an aesthetic quality that reminds of the Greeks. Because how much unity and how much variety, so it reminds of what the Greeks believed in religiously. It seems like aesthetics was almost their religion. So they believed that this way they could express the most, they could get closest to the idea of harmony through this aesthetic philosophy. And the academicians picked up on that,
Mm-hmm.
The Renaissance artists picked up anything Greek. It was just really cool. Yeah. And I do personally really like that aesthetic. Because it allows me to paint awful, terrible things beautifully too, aesthetically beautiful. Which should make it more hopeful that it's not all encompassing and all powerful. That there are things that are even more powerful. And that's, I think, where the hope lies. And that's what I've been trying to paint here.
What's left? What's left to do?
Well, Estella's finished. Rebecca's finished here. I need to finish this. Final layer on the old man, on the empathy. This is a computer suggesting that, not much has changed. The keyboard here needs some treatment still. Some light hitting the different
Planes.
Yeah, the different planes here. I need to introduce some light there. Here the furious fire, lava, angry kind of explosion thing is also almost finished. Here I have to finish this part of the landscape. This is finished. This is finished. This is finished. This is finished. Bird is too. Frame here.
Can you talk about that detailed part? I'm gonna come in closer.
This one.
Yes.
Took me 2 days. Took me 2 days. This is painted with that special lead white that supposedly Rembrandt used to get his texture.
Mm-hmm.
I treat that lead white like gold, To me, this stuff is, first of all, it's so expensive and it's so magical. So I forgot the word. You know that word.
Thixotropic.
Okay, that's what it is. So you can actually put that on your canvas and it looks like a drop of water. so incredible. So that's, Rembrandt probably just loaded his paintings with that stuff, and that's why he gets all this interesting texture that looks so incredibly unique, right? But I think it's that lead. It's that lead white. See, your texture quality looks just different with this kind of paint. Absolutely amazing. So this is painted super thick, because here I kind of went expressionism. I went crazy on this. Because, like I said, I broke a lot of rules in this painting. So, and on that day, I had actually been to an expressionist exhibition. And I felt totally inspired. As a fire, this will look much more like a volcanic eruption, lava, fire, whatever, if I paint this expressionistically. So I did. It's very thick. and then sort of to make compositional sense with this thickness here, the most of the painting is really smooth and eggshell, like an eggshell, because I sand a lot to get rid of not only the dust but also of texture I do not want. I wet sand the painting, of course. Don't sand your paintings when you use lead without water. That's really important. Okay, so that's why this is also painted very thick, to kind of make textural sense. It just felt right to me to have like a frame around all this texture with a frame that also has texture. Having said this though, wherever the light hits, there's in some places everything that's really up close, there's a lot of thick paint. I really wanted to be inspired by some of the Flemish, the Flemish painters, how they did that. I love that. Like here, the face all the way in front, this is painted really thickly. Not quite like late Rembrandt, but it still has a lot of paint on it.
There's just so much to discover, like even on the frame.
Yeah.
Which I also love. Like the canvas, or it's on die bond, right?
Mm-hmm.
The die bond panel goes until here, and then this is wood frame, but you put canvas on this part of the frame so that you could paint it, so that you have this floating strip. It's amazing.
Yeah, I wanted that strip to float. It's gonna be, it's right now it's kind of obnoxious. I want it all toned down. It won't be so obnoxious. It will be more like this in the end, except for the corners that I'll leave them silver leafed. But then I will tone everything down to this, and have all these little symbols and whatever it is, whatever comes to mind, Sometimes I write on it. I write things that have something to do with the theme. Like down here is names of people who have been involved in all this, in this story. Friedrich Spee. Friedrich Spee lived from 1591 to 1435. He was the first dude who had the courage to write something against the Malleus Maleficarum book. First dude who had the courage to, because he really put his own life in danger. He was a real hero. And he actually is the one who inspired this figure over here, along with my fatherly feelings, So I was thinking of Friedrich Spee when I painted that. And he has my absolute admiration, because to me it's like, okay, so imagine imagine you have to watch while a crowd burns a person alive, and you stand there. In fact, you are forced to stand there and watch. You have to, by decree, right? What do you do? What do you do with that? It's like, how can you still have a life afterwards? Yeah, so I think those are important things to ask ourselves, no matter who we are. Because it could happen. I would call those moments crossroads, where we find out who we really want to be, what is important to us, So maybe we can prepare ourselves for these moments through talking about it and painting about it and sculpting about it and writing about it.
Let's see if there are any more questions. We have about 20 minutes left, I think. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. More about the symbolic meaning questions, but I think we went quite deep into that now. Andrea says that the old man with empathy is her favorite figure in the drawing. The expression, but also the hair and the skin. And Robert says, I think I worry too much about perspective of figures when contemplating multi-figure paintings, when references could just be placed anywhere? Question mark. Secondly, do you have any tips regarding painting from photographs? For example, diminishing value of lights, heightening darks, etc.
Yeah, very good question. So the first one, it totally depends what you want to do with your painting. You're an artist and you need to realize you are free. You are flippin' free. You don't have to do anything. So yeah, if perspective is important to you, then you need to think about the horizon line, and you need to think about where the horizon line is on that figure, and then you place it accordingly. So it's no big deal. You figure out the horizon line, and you keep that consistent. The horizon line in this painting is here, and all you have to think about is that wherever the horizon line is, all the forms that are above it, they tend to go this way, and all the forms that are below it, they tend to go that way. And this stays true no matter how far away the figure is, except, and this is why you have to carefully think about that when you shoot reference photos or you work from life. You need to have enough distance from the model to make this thing work. Make sure you have enough distance. If you're too close, then you have foreshortening going on, and it gets strange and weird. So you need to have enough distance. But if you have enough distance, it's fine. Every figure is gonna be it's gonna be fine. It'll make sense. It'll look okay. The forms will make sense how they turn. I hope that makes sense.
Then there's a question about which artists to study.
But the other one he had another question I didn't answer.
Oh.
Something about photos?
Yeah, sorry about that. just tips for painting from photographs.
Yeah.
And when to adjust the values, like darkening certain things or lightening other things.
I used to only work from life until a painter friend of mine told me, Patrick, because of my situation that had changed in my life, and my financial situation had changed, and he said, Patrick, you need to buy a computer, otherwise you're going to lose your profession. You'll be bankrupt and just you have to quit. And I really didn't like it, but I bought that computer, and I quickly discovered what a shitty photographer I am. And then, but you know what I also discovered is you don't have to be a good photographer. If you've learned to work from life, you don't need good photos. You just don't. You see, the thing about working from photos is you have to realize everything in painting is an abstraction. So you are always an there's no such thing as realism. You'd have to take reality and stick it on your canvas, which you can't. So everything is a form of abstraction. It's really important to realize. So then you have to also realize that the camera is doing the same thing. Camera is abstracting a very complex thing called nature, right? So the camera is abstracting in its own way. And it sees things in its own way. And if you were a super well-trained classical painter gone photographer, today with computers you could actually do unbelievable stuff with photography, because then you would know how to tweak things and this and that and this and that to make it look a lot more the way the old masters were looking and thinking, right? But I can't do that, and I'm not interested in that. So what I have to do is, when I work from a photograph, I have to translate what I see in the photo to what I learned from nature and what I want, what I personally want. So this has absolutely nothing to do with photorealism.
Is Rebecca's face there from that photograph?
Yeah.
Maybe that would be interesting to show for a second. Can you bring the photograph next to the painting?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly like not being a slave to the reference, but using it creatively.
Yeah, that's probably is not a good example.
No.
Because the way I broke it all the... Yeah, that's...
It changed a lot of it.
Yeah.
But you have the freedom. You feel comfortable doing that.
Oh, totally. I mean, but basically what I can tell you is what the cameras will do. If you're a shitty photographer like I am, you know, the cameras look into things. The cameras don't give you the value relationships the way they look when you squint your eyes, you know. Camera obscura, different story, but we'll get into that another time, because that complicates matters. So just know the camera is going to lie to you mostly about reflected lights. Usually gets them too bright. Then you need to remember that your reflected lights in the shadows, reflected lights are always in the shadows, that they have to be darker than your darkest dark in the halftones. If you don't do that, you actually break up the forms, you know. So with that in mind, always, especially in the computer, don't look into those shadows and don't believe the image, what it tells you about reflected lights, because it will ruin your form. Sculptors understand that very well, and the form gets ruined, you know. Yeah, so you want to, if you're interested, again, you can of course do that, you're free. But if you're interested in form like the old masters loved to show it, don't exaggerate your reflected lights, which a lot of actually painters have done in the past, they just didn't know. They didn't squint hard enough, or they forgot. And they loved those reflected lights and exaggerated them. And it actually, what you're painting is now, you're losing atmosphere and you're losing form, because you're painting a bump in the form rather than reflected light. You know, you just need to understand that your painting is very limited what it can do with regards to reality. And if you stay within those limitations, you're fine. You can create an unbelievable illusion of reality, like we see in Vermeer's best work, you know, which everyone has their nose up against and wonders how in the world did he do that? And
Vermeer would be a good one to study. Would you recommend?
Yes, Vermeer ruined my life in painting. Because I did a Vermeer copy, and he ruined my life. It was so amazing, absolutely amazing. And this might be a funny story to mention. You know those drops of water that I'm painting on the painting, with that special lead white. When I did the painting, the copy at the Metropolitan Museum of the Vermeer, I could not for the life of me figure out how he got those highlights to look like a drop of water. And I asked everyone, I researched, I even tried leaded glass. Have you ever heard of leaded glass? It's a medium. It just didn't do it the same way. I was just, and now I know. He used this kind of lead white.
What kind of lead white is it?
It's what is it called? It's like produced with horse shit. Stack something.
Stack white.
Yeah. Harding, Michael Harding is his name. He sells it. He makes it himself.
Another question. Well, unless you have other artists you recommend studying.
All of them. I have other ones that I really, really like. This is funny, you know. What really fascinates me, like many other people, is Bouguereau's flesh. Bouguereau was certainly not a profound philosopher, but he was unbelievable craftsperson. To learn from him just makes a lot of sense. I mean, this guy it's just amazing. It's like, in a way, what he did technically in his best paintings is like the accumulation of knowledge and skill of hundreds of years of gathering up all this stuff, and it just exploded with Bouguereau technically. That's how I see him. But then other people, like I once saw an Alma Tadema in California. This absolutely blew me away. I was like, holy cow, is that was so well done. You know, I don't like his taste and his perfect, everything is squeaky clean, aesthetically neoclassicistic, which I also love, but I'm much more opinionated about forms personally, that I would subdue them all to the classical ideals. It drives me crazy. I have very high opinions about forms that are my own, you know, which is a romantic idea. It's not a classical thing where you subdue your own personal temperament to the truth of aesthetics. You know, I'm not like that, even though it's fascinating how I am also drawn to it. Like so many others, I will admit I'm drawn to it. And sometimes I'm embarrassed that I am drawn to it.
Another question about your fondest or some fond moments from making this painting so far.
The fondest moments.
Memories.
the one there were several, and that there still will be some. I think when something just simply works out the way I imagine it, when it starts to say what I want to say, of course that's great. But the fondest moment was when I painted Estella the way I wanted to, when she turned out the way she turned out. Like I said before, because of her condition that she has right now, her illness, and yeah, it gave me a lot of strength, and hopefully she likes it too. I think she likes it. Yeah. You know, it's like when something comes alive the way you hope for, the way you wish for. That's like, it's like a drug. Makes you happy.
Perfect segue to the next question from Kia. She asks, does painting make you happy?
Sometimes. Sometimes painting makes me supremely happy. But guess what? Sculpting makes you happy too. It's like, holy cow. And it's like, sculpting is amazing. Absolutely. Especially with rocks. When you work the rocks, that's just insane. But yeah, painting can be a wonderful thing, but the way I paint is so much work. You know, like I said, Vermeer ruined me because everything looks unfinished.
By comparison,
everything looks unfinished. It's like that painting. It's like after I was doing the copy of that Vermeer, and I walked around, and all the paintings in the museum looked unfinished. All the other paintings looked totally unfinished. This is just the wildest thing. Yeah, he just really pushed, in some of his paintings, he pushed paint further than anyone else. And that fascinates me. I like the academic approach. I'm not an impressionist. I like pencils that you can sharpen really, really sharp to a tiny little point, and then I like to go fiddle around with that and play with forms. What makes me most happy is to draw, paint, and sculpt out of imagination. That's just where my brain is the most comfortable. You know, we're all different there, and I feel like you need to figure out what makes you the most, if you want to, you know, especially if you are a person, like I said in the beginning, if you need to paint, sculpt, in order to survive emotionally, figure out what makes you really tick, you know? Figure out how your brain works. Figure out, okay, so do I possess the kind of brain that enjoys looking at nature and draws the inspiration from nature to express myself? How much am I like that? You know, do I really enjoy sitting down, blank piece of paper, start drawing? What does that do with my brain? You know, how much satisfaction do I get? Kind of experiment with that, and then see what happens. You know, it's really important because, you know, some of us are highly sensitive people, and the way this world functions just really, really does a number on us, and we get sad and sometimes even depressed, and that's dangerous. You know, depression can be really dangerous, and it's not necessary. We can find a way to be happy. I think we can. You know, I've lost friends who didn't want to live anymore. But it's devastating for the ones who are left behind, you know. But yeah, whatever it is, death, we all don't understand it. We haven't done it before, and if we have, we can't remember. So it's like, yeah, whatever it is, just life. I mean, look at how much beauty there is out there, and how many people are such nice people. I mean, like Dorian. He makes my day when I see him. It's just incredible, you know, our friendship, what it's given to me.
Thank you.
It's very, very real.
Likewise.
Yeah. So I think even, you know, a lot of artists are very sensitive people. Just don't get distracted. How much time do we have left?
4 minutes if we stop
4 minutes.
on the half
Okay,
hour.
then I will not start going there. How to keep yourself more happy in the art world. This is for another time.
Danielle Music is asking what the symbology is of the root cluster.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Danielle, it's still a mystery to me. I put that thing there, and I'm not totally clear on it. It's just the very beginning, and I think I'll say more about that later. You know, right now it has to do with taking care of each other and of nature. But it's not like environmental propaganda. This painting does not want to go there. It has much more to do with the empathy part, you know, with that man. Yeah, because I mean, just the way these plants were cut off, you know, Katarina's life was cut off. She was 11, come on. And yeah, it's disturbing.
Well, there are lots of hearts and thumbs up and people saying thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I plan on doing much more of this, talk about this painting, try to convince smart people to say something about it. You know, experts, psychologists, philosophers, etc., historians. But this was a good start, and you've given me this chance, and I thank you very much. Thank you, Dorian, for giving me this chance.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is super fun for me. It's been amazing to see the process of this image, this epic painting coming alive over the last decade.
You've seen it from the beginning.
Yeah.
You saw it blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we met, it was all brown.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
Empty.
I tinted the ground with the transparent brown oxide.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been thinking about what we can do to share some of Patrick's knowledge about painting and composition and anatomy and perspective, you know, so many things. And we're not sure yet what form that will take, but we put together a page with a mailing list form. I'll put the link in the chat. If you want to know when the next live stream like this happens, or a class with Patrick or something like this, you can sign up for that email list. Yeah, it's, I mean, I'll come back into the frame. You are the reason why I moved here from Barcelona, you know, to a tiny village in the mountains.
Which is
because of nature and because
unbelievable that you did that. It's just, it makes a world of difference. And I can talk about art now, even though we live in the boondocks. I can talk about art with you, who's had a very similar training, you know. There's lots of artists around here, but they haven't had the training, and so I can't speak the same language with them as I can speak with you. So it's been just really great for me that you came.
I'll give you a hug. Our mics will rasp maybe, but thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
I hope we'll do much more like this. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you next time. Bye.